My name is Elena Carter, and I will never forget the silence that swallowed the room on the day I was supposed to feel most alive. I stood there in front of a four-tier cake, a silver knife trembling in my hand, staring out at the rows of empty chairs where my family should have been. The white ribbons still fluttered from the backs of those seats, as if mocking me, reminding me of who wasn't there. On the groom's side, laughter and applause filled the air, Daniel's relatives cheering us on. On mine, there was nothing but an aching void. The knife hovered above the cake, but my hand refused to move. My chest felt hollow, and I tried to force a smile for the photographer, but my lips wouldn't obey. I could hear the clinking of glasses, the soft music in the background, even Daniel whispering, "It's okay, we've got this." But nothing drowned out the emptiness that screamed louder than any song. Then my phone buzzed against the table beside me. Once, twice, again, and again. By the time I reached for it, the screen was flooded with 42 missed calls from my mother. 42. My fingers shook so hard, I nearly dropped the phone. My first thought was panic. Had something happened to them? My second thought was anger. Why would she call me now in the middle of my wedding after they had all chosen not to come? I stared at that glowing screen, my reflection fractured across the glass, and I couldn't decide if I wanted to answer or smash it to the ground. A swirl of emotions burned through me, rage at their absence, fear of what those calls meant, and a sickening curiosity that clawed at my chest. My family hadn't even bothered to show up. Not my parents, not my sister, not a single soul with my blood in their veins. And yet, here was my mother desperate to reach me, as if whatever she had to say could erase the humiliation I felt standing alone in that moment. The applause died down. Daniel squeezed my hand, searching my face for strength I didn't have. I swallowed hard, pressed the phone to my palm, and forced myself to breathe. Something was wrong, something bigger than I could see. I knew deep in that hollow silence that those 42 missed calls were about to change everything I thought I knew about my family. I didn't grow up thinking my family hated me. That would have been easier, I think. Hatred is loud and obvious, but what I lived through was quieter, more invisible. It was the constant reminder that no matter how hard I tried, I would never shine as bright as my younger sister, Madison. From the moment she was born, Madison was the star. My parents adored her performances, her piano recitals, her theater auditions. They would beam with pride, record every second, and plaster her photos on the walls. Meanwhile, my achievements seemed to dissolve the moment they happened. When I made honor roll, my father said, "That's nice," before turning to ask Madison about her rehearsal. When I scored the winning point in a basketball game, my mother clapped politely, then rushed to drive Madison to dance class. I remember the night of my high school graduation most vividly. I was valedictorian. I had worked for years to earn that moment, to stand at the podium in front of my classmates and deliver a speech about perseverance. I scanned the crowd, searching for my parents' faces, but they weren't there. Later, I learned they had chosen to attend Madison's regional choir performance instead. I gave my speech to an auditorium filled with strangers smiling bravely, while inside, I felt like a ghost. That night, I sat on the steps outside the school until my friend Allison came to find me. She handed me a bouquet of grocery store flowers, saying, "Your parents should be here, but I am." I cried so hard my makeup ran down my face, not just because they missed it, but because I realized it didn't surprise me anymore. By the time I was in college, I stopped waiting for their validation. I studied biomedical engineering, diving into textbooks and labs, telling myself that if I just built a life that was mine, their neglect wouldn't matter. Still, the wound lingered. Every phone call felt like a test. Were they calling because of me, or because of Madison therapy became my lifeline? At 22, I sat across from Dr. Patel, who asked me a question that cracked everything open. What would it mean if they never give you the recognition you're hoping for? The silence that followed was heavier than anything I'd ever felt. Slowly, I learned to stop chasing what they refused to give. I learned to set boundaries to protect myself from the cycle of disappointment. And for a while, it worked. I built a life in Boston, got a stable job at a medical device company, and surrounded myself with friends who actually saw me. When I met Daniel, I thought I had finally escaped the shadow of my family. He was kind, steady, and he treated me like my voice mattered. For the first time, I believed I could have a family where love wasn't rationed. But even with all the progress I made, the scar never truly faded. Whenever I visited home, Madison still filled the air with her presence, and my parents still revolved around her orbit. I told myself it didn't matter anymore. I told myself their approval was no longer the currency of my happiness. Yet deep down, I still longed for them to see me just once without looking past me. I didn't know it then, but that longing would become the very weapon Madison used against me. Years later, as my wedding day approached, the ghost of my childhood would rise again, forcing me to confront the truth I had spent my entire life avoiding. When Daniel proposed, I thought I had finally outrun the years of being invisible. He got down on one knee in the Boston Public Garden, the city lights shimmering on the pond, and for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like someone's second choice. I cried into his shoulder as strangers clapped, and I told myself, this is the beginning of a life that belongs only to me. Planning the wedding was both exhilarating and exhausting, but I clung to every detail because it felt like proof that I mattered. Every flower, every song, every invitation carried weight. I sent out the invitations months in advance, hoping maybe foolishly that this time my family would show up for me. Daniel's parents were overjoyed, his sisters offered to help with the decorations, and even his grandmother volunteered to bake cookies for the rehearsal dinner. For once, I felt surrounded by love. Then, 2 weeks before the wedding, Madison made her announcement. She and her boyfriend Ryan were engaged. At first, I was genuinely happy for her. I wanted to believe we could both celebrate big milestones without it turning into a competition. But within days, my mother called with words that knocked the air out of me. "Elena, sweetheart," she said, her voice syrupy and careful, "Madison's engagement party is going to be on the same day as your wedding. We think it would be best if you postpone the ceremony just by a few weeks. That way the family doesn't have to choose." I was standing in my office at work, staring out at the city skyline, gripping the phone so tightly my knuckles went white. "You're asking me to move my wedding for her engagement party?" I asked, my voice shaking with disbelief. "Honey, it's just an engagement," she replied, as if that made it less absurd. "But it's very important to Madison. She's so excited, and we don't want her to feel overshadowed." I laughed then, a bitter, broken laugh that startled even me. "Overshadowed, Mom. It's my wedding. She picked my date to sabotage me. And you're letting her." There was silence on the other end, the kind that confirmed everything I already knew. They weren't going to stand up for me. They never had. That night, I cried into Daniel's chest, my tears soaking his shirt. "I won't move it," I whispered. "Not this time. I'm not giving her my day." He kissed my forehead and said, "Then we'll do it with whoever shows up. Even if it's just the two of us." I clung to those words, but the next blow came from where I least expected. My best friend Chloe, who had promised to be my maid of honor since college, suddenly grew distant. She stopped replying to my texts about the bridesmaids' dresses, skipped out on our final planning meeting, and then sent a short message that gutted me. "I'm sorry, Elena. I can't be part of this. I'll be at Madison's party." I couldn't breathe when I read it. Chloe had been there through every heartbreak, every therapy session, every time I swore I'd stop caring about my family. And now she was abandoning me for the very person who had spent her life tearing me down. Later, I would find out Madison had sent Chloe fabricated screenshots, messages that made it look like I was mocking her behind her back. But in that moment, all I felt was betrayal. I went to bed that night, staring at the empty space where my maid of honor should have stood, wondering if my wedding would collapse before it even began. The weight of my family's absence, Madison's manipulation, and Chloe's betrayal pressed so heavily on me that for a fleeting second, I considered canceling everything. But then I remembered that hollow silence from my childhood, the way it felt to stand alone at graduation. I refused to let Madison take another milestone away from me. Even if I had to walk down the aisle with only Daniel's family behind me, I would do it. I would carve this memory into stone, a testament that I existed, that my life mattered. What I didn't know then was that the choice I made to go forward, no matter what was about to collide with a storm I couldn't see coming. The day of the wedding would bring a truth so devastating, it would split open every wound I thought I had already healed. The morning of my wedding felt too bright, too hopeful for what the day would become. Sunlight poured through the hotel window, striking the gown that hung like a fragile promise. The room was quiet, and the absence was louder than any sound. No mother adjusting my veil, no father pacing nervously, no sister offering fake smiles. Just silence and the faint hum of the city outside. Daniel's sisters zipped me into my dress, their kindness able to disguise the gap where my family should have been. When I walked down the aisle and saw Daniel waiting steady and warm, my chest loosened just enough to let me breathe. His family filled their side of the church with laughter and tears. Mine stood empty ribbons fluttering on vacant chairs. The ceremony blurred. Vows, rings, a kiss. It was everything I dreamed of, and yet half hollow. Married but abandoned, celebrated but unseen. At the reception, I tried to push through. I danced. I smiled for photos. I accepted Daniel's grandmother's hug when she whispered, "You're ours now." Her tenderness nearly undid me. Then came the cake. Daniel placed the knife in my hand, cameras flashing, guests cheering. My smile faltered when I saw my phone light up on the table. 42 missed calls from my mother. The number made me dizzy. Why now? Why today? After they had chosen Madison's party over my wedding, I slipped into the hallway, dress heavy around me, heart pounding. When I answered, my mother's voice was frantic. "Elena, it's Madison. Everything's falling apart." My anger erupted. "You didn't come to my wedding. What could you possibly say to me now?" Her voice cracked. Ryan ended it. Right in the middle of the party. He told everyone what she did. I gripped the phone tighter. "What do you mean?" He found the fake messages. The invitations she blocked. The lies she told. He confronted her in front of everyone. He said he couldn't marry someone who'd sabotage her own sister's wedding. The world tilted. For years, I'd been the afterthought, the expendable one. And now, in a single explosion, Madison's mask had shattered. Guests gasping, Ryan's voice, steady Madison, crumbling under the weight of her own cruelty. I wasn't there, but I could see it all. On the line, my mother sobbed. "We should have been with you. We let her manipulate us. We were wrong." I slid down the wall, tears streaking my face. "You didn't just let her manipulate you," I whispered. "You chose her, always." She went quiet, her breath ragged. For the first time, remorse lived in her voice. But it was too late to give me the wedding I deserved. I hung up and stood in that hallway for a long time, the muffled music from the reception seeping through the walls. When I finally rejoined Daniel, cheers erupted as if nothing had happened. But inside me, something had shifted permanently. That night, lying awake beside my husband, I replayed the words I'd heard, the engagement canceled. The lies revealed my parents broken. The truth had finally surfaced, and I knew nothing about my family would ever be the same again. That night, after the last sparkler burned out and the hotel suite fell quiet, I lay on top of the covers in my wedding dress, the zipper half undone, the bouquet wilting on the chair. Daniel stirred, propped himself on an elbow, and asked if I wanted to talk. I nodded, and the words spilled out how the empty chairs had felt like a verdict, how the phone call with my mother had cracked something open and let all the years of grievance pour through. He listened without flinching. When I finally went still, he kissed the heel of my hand and said, "Whatever happens with them next, you don't go through it alone." I let that promise anchor me to the bed, and to the thin strand of hope I hadn't dared touch all day. In the morning, the city looked scrubbed clean. I showered, slipped into a sundress, and met my parents in the hotel cafe. They were already there, huddled in a corner booth, looking smaller than I remembered. My father stood when he saw me, then hesitated, as if unsure whether he was allowed to embrace me. My mother's eyes were swollen, the kind of red that doesn't fade after a single night of sleep. For a long moment, none of us spoke. The cappuccino machine hissed. Cutlery chimed against plates. Somewhere behind the counter, a radio murmured a soft, cheerful song that felt disrespectful to the gravity of the moment. Finally, my mother reached across the table and rested her hand on mine, palm trembling. "We should have been there," she said, voice raw. "We believed Madison. We believed her because we always do." My father cleared his throat, the sound brittle. I am ashamed, he said. Not just of yesterday, of years. We made our love conditional without meaning to. We ran toward the child who shouted the loudest and left the quiet one to fend for herself. I wanted to tell them that I didn't need their confessions, that I had already built a life without their approval. But the truth pressed up through my ribs. I had wanted this acknowledgement my entire life. It didn't fix anything. It mattered anyway. I won't pretend yesterday didn't happen, I said. I won't pretend years didn't happen. If you want a place in my life, there are conditions, real ones. The word felt deliberate on my tongue, conditions the mirror image of all the invisible ones they had set for me without ever saying them out loud. Therapy, I continued, with me and also without me. No more triangulating. No more letting Madison's emergencies dictate every decision. And if I say I need space, you respect it. They both nodded, eager, almost relieved to be given instructions. My mother fished a notebook from her purse and scribbled as if she were afraid the rules might evaporate unless she caught them on paper. When she looked up, tears broke loose again. We will do it, she whispered. Even if you never forgive us, we will do it. Forgiveness. The word landed like a pebble, dropped into deep water, ripples moving out of sight. I didn't offer it. Not because I wanted to punish them, but because I was finally done performing softness I didn't yet feel. I stood, and my father surprised me by stepping aside without reaching for a hug. He understood, maybe for the first time, that boundaries could be a form of love. Weeks turned into months. They started therapy with a family counselor in our hometown. I joined every other session on video. The conversations were awkward, sometimes infuriating, occasionally tender. We learned to name the patterns. We'd been breathing for decades. Enmeshment parentification, the golden child pedestal that turned love into competition. There were nights I slammed my laptop shut and went for a run in the cold, burning the anger out of my lungs. There were mornings I opened my inbox to find an unprompted apology from my father, plain and unadorned, and let it sit like a small clean stone in my palm. Madison disappeared after the implosion. For a while, I didn't say her name at all, as if she were an allergic reaction I could avoid by refusing to acknowledge it. Then one gray afternoon in November, she texted. The message was bare of punctuation, as if she didn't trust herself to aim, "I need to talk." I read it 3 times and put the phone face down on the table. Daniel, drying a mug by the sink, said, "You don't owe her anything." I nodded. That was true. It was also true that I wouldn't feel free until I decided myself what I did or didn't owe. We met in a public garden, stripped to its winter bones. Madison stood by a bench in a wool coat, hair tucked into a beanie, the bravado that had scaffolded her entire life gone. For a second, I hated the sympathy that rose in me. Then I remembered that I could hold more than one truth at once, the harm she had done, and the softness of a sister I still recognized beneath it. "I'm not here to make excuses," she said, voice low. "I'm not even here to ask you to forgive me. I need to tell the truth out loud to the person I took it from." She described how she curated our parents' attention, the way she curated her social feeds, the high that came from hijacking spotlights, the panic she felt when I wouldn't move my date just because she asked. "I wanted the world to look at me," she whispered. "I wanted them to stop seeing you." She swallowed hard. "I'm in therapy. I'm not good at it, but I'm going." The confession didn't dissolve anything. It did, however, rearrange the weight I'd been carrying. "I'm building something that can't include chaos," I said. "If you want to be in it, there are rules. You don't get access to my life if you choose manipulation. You don't get to rewrite my reality to feed yours." "I know," she answered, eyes wet. "I know I lost the right to ask for trust. I'm asking for a chance to earn it." We walked a few slow laps on the path, not touching. When we parted, I didn't promise anything, but I didn't shut the door either. The hinge squeaked as it moved, a sound that was not pretty and not final, which felt exactly right. In December, a test strip bloomed with 2 pale lines, faint as breath on glass. I carried the secret for 2 days, keeping it like a lit match cupped in my hands. Then I told Daniel, and we laughed and cried into the same kiss, and the future rearranged itself with a click I felt in my bones. When I told my parents, they didn't squeal or smother. They asked what I needed. I told them I needed them to keep their appointments, to keep their promises, to show up for me, in quiet ways instead of grand gestures. They said yes, and for once, it didn't feel like a performance. Sometimes late at night, I replay the wedding in my head, not the empty chairs, but the moment Daniel looked at me like I was the whole room. I replay the cafe conversation where I spoke my terms out loud and no one argued. I replay the winter garden where my sister's apology didn't fix anything and still meant something. I hold these scenes up to the light, not as proof that everything is healed, but as evidence that healing is moving through us. My name is Elena Carter. On my wedding day, my family didn't choose me, so I chose myself. And now, step by step, I'm learning how to let them meet me on the road I've built. Thank you for watching. If you enjoy these family drama and revenge stories, please subscribe and join me for more every day.